In this episode, Charlene is joined by baby sleep experts Sarah and Elli from My Connected Motherhood. Together, they unpack the myths of sleep training, the truth about co-sleeping, and why trusting parental instincts can change everything.
Hi, Sarah. Hi, Ellie. I'm so happy to have you on the show today to talk about baby sleep and whether or not we are going to do baby sleep training. I know that's a big topic, and you two are absolute experts. I have so many clients asking me about baby sleep training, yes or no, so much confusion. And I really hope today that we can go through the myth and the reality and get your experience and expertise. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
I was wondering if we could start off by you letting us know, how did you become baby sleep experts to begin with? What's your story?
Just our own struggles, I think, is the main reason. I know with my first, he was easy enough that I kind of limped my way through it and just took naps with him and figured it out as we went. But with our second, it was a little more tricky. And I just felt like, okay, I didn't sleep train the first one and I don't really want to sleep train the second, but I don't know how else to do anything. And so when I was struggling with my second is actually when I came across the certification that we did. And I think Ellie probably has a similar story.
Yeah, I think it's similar, except for the fact that Sarah's first slept and mine absolutely did not. So I think my kids have, between the two of them, gone through all the different sleep challenges that I think we help parents with now. And I remember when they were little, feeling like it was sleep train or bust. Either you cried out or you waited out, and that didn't feel like a great feeling as a mom. I valued the relationship I was building, but I also could feel myself slipping away as we were going through those early years where, I don't want to sleep train and I physically cannot keep going the way we are. So I think really just looking for that middle ground of, okay, what else is there? Because I like to joke, I read everything that was on the internet in 2016 about baby sleep because I was like, there's got to be something. There's got to be a way that, we can show up for ourselves, show up for our babies, and hold everybody's needs together. And eventually that's what we found, and that's what we do now with families. And it all started with a couple little babies who weren't the best sleepers, I think.
Yeah. Oh, bless. Well, what I really want to know is, before we dive into the debate of sleep training, yes or no, can we start with the foundation of what is baby sleep training?
Yeah, so I think at
Yeah,
least sorry. I was gonna say I think the simple way I phrase it for a lot of parents is if it's something that you feel like you're ignoring your instincts or forcing yourself to leave them alone or do something that doesn't feel right, that just kind of wanders into that sleep training kind of realm in terms of anything that's, asking you to time how long before you respond to them or asking you to withhold any comfort or responsiveness. Anything like that kind of falls into the sleep training area of things for us. I think there's a lot of misconceptions too that if you don't sleep train, there'll be zero tears. And I think that's where we are kind of that middle ground that children are going to have emotions and babies are going to cry. And that's okay as long as it's being supported. So anything that's isolated emotion, asking you to ignore your instincts or asking you to put a timer on withholding comfort and just feels misaligned for how you're trying to parent during the day versus at night, then that's kind of what we define that as sleep training.
And I know, Sarah, you have quite strong views on separation and you do a lot of posts on that. Could you tell us a little bit more about your views?
I think my biggest concern with separation is that, during the day, we understand that babies need to be with caregivers, whether it's a parent or someone stepping in while a parent is away. So why would it be any different at nighttime when nighttime is already representing a pretty big separation in terms of, being emotionally disconnected while we're sleeping, that it gets a little tricky when we are struggling with separation and the only options presented to us is to force more separation. Whereas we like to flip it and say, okay, if we know that separation is so hard for them, can we make that easier by building an extra connection or building in safety so that they can feel that sleep is less vulnerable or that they know they have a safe place in us when they need it?
I really appreciate that insight. And could you tell us why you think traditional sleep training may not always be the right answer?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm not going to pretend like I didn't try it, because just like Ellie was at a point where it's like, okay, I need to do something. And I did say, like, with our first, we didn't do it, which I guess isn't fully true because when he was 2, I did try it because he was just taking hours and hours to fall asleep. And so I think the issue, and he's a very good example of this, is that there was actually an underlying issue going on. He was very low in iron, and that was causing restlessness for sleep and taking forever to fall asleep. So what had once been, a 5-10 minute snuggle, super easy, one of my favorite parts, relaxing with him for the day and cuddling and little chats, had gotten really stressful. And so I did try sleep training and that didn't work. And we were able to find the reason as to why that change had happened. That really solidified to me as like why sleep training won't always be the answer for everyone, because sleep can be giving us clues. Sleep can be telling us that something more is going on. And if we just sleep train, we're kind of just ignoring that root cause, right? So if I had continued sleep training him, despite it feeling awful for us, I never would have known that he had a need that wasn't being met at that time in terms of his iron levels. So I think it's just sleep training is just very much like surface level, quick fix, not really looking at the full picture. And so whether it is that there's something more going on or your child just wants you, because that's okay too, sleep training is kind of just that slap on the band-aid, let's just get through it quick kind of approach.
I was wondering if you could tell us more about the link between parental stress and baby stress. And specifically here, I'm thinking a lot about my female clients. So I work with very accomplished female, powerful professionals. They're super dedicated to their career. They're usually first-time moms, and they're really navigating that struggle of feeling that they're not doing enough at work, not doing enough with baby, a lot of mom guilt. That's the number one word that I hear all the time is I feel guilty when I'm at home because I want to be working, or I'm letting, my
Let your baby
boss
fall.
down. And then when I'm with my baby, it's constant guilt, right? And then they feel stressed and they tell me, I know that it has an impact on my baby because that night my baby's so stressed. Can you tell us the link, and how can we help those moms feel a little bit less guilty?
Yeah. So it is, I think, first of all, a great thing to bring awareness to is that they are co-regulating with us. I know, especially when mine were younger, I often said like, oh, it's really interesting and neat in a way that I can, focus on my own regulation and I can see that in their behavior. But then also when I was having a hard day, it was frustrating because it's like, can I not just have a bad day without all 3 of you following in behind me with that stress and dysregulation, right? So it is something, first of all, just to bring awareness to, because as much as it sounds like a lot of your clients do recognize that, I think that's something I totally didn't understand in the beginning, that it's like there is that biological connection between us that has to do with regulation and stress and all of that, right? So I think, first of all, a lot of the issue is that so much of mom's stress comes from unrealistic expectations. So that feeling that we have to do it all and we have to do it in a certain way, and that even the unrealistic expectations around sleep, that they should be falling asleep alone, they should be sleeping 7 to 7, they shouldn't be needing night feeds, all of those things are adding to that stress, right? And so that's why we try to spend a lot of time normalizing infant and toddler sleep, for the fact that I still lay with my 4-year-old to fall asleep, because when we understand like, oh, okay, that's normal, that's okay, that instantly takes off a lot of the stress. So that's why a lot of the conversations we have are around normalizing what is biologically normal and trying to close that gap between unrealistic expectations and biological norms to take off that stress. Outside of that, I think one thing that we can help moms a lot with is just like, when it comes to bedtime or those hard moments, finding your own ways to regulate yourself. We're always so focused on just trying to calm down baby, but we're still super stressed. So then that's kind of not going to line up. So if we can help parents identify, what strategies do you have that help you calm yourself, or what strategies do you have that help you stay regulated, both in the moment and day to day, that can help then you co-regulate more positively in those harder moments. Hoping that's answering your question.
Yes, I think the topic of co-regulation is so important to cover because the baby is often the mirror image, right, of how the mom is feeling.
And that's why it's so frustrating that there's so much emphasis put on self-soothing, because if we know that babies need to co-regulate with us so much, how could they possibly regulate on their own and self-soothe to sleep?
So, what are your go-to holistic co-regulation mechanism that you would recommend for moms to also, put their oxygen mask on first, so to speak, so that they can feel a little bit that their nervous system is down-regulated, so that the
Yeah.
baby is also calming down?
Yeah, so it could just be sensory things, like whether it's, if you are very dysregulated in a moment, putting your hands under cold water or pushing hard on a wall, or different strategies like that are going to vary parent to parent or just person to person. So just like sensory kind of tools. But then also too, I like to use an example of one thing that made a huge difference for me was that when bedtime was taking too long, I would get so frustrated because then I would end up falling asleep with them. And then I'd wake up at 10 o'clock and be like, I don't even have time to brush my own teeth. Like, what is this? Like, I feel so not even a human, right? And so when you look at regulation, looking at it as like a big picture thing. So for me, that meant like when they were in the bath, I would do a nighttime routine for myself. So even if, I fell asleep with them or the night took really long because they needed me extra that day, putting in those little pockets for yourself through the day. So that meant for me, even just brushing my teeth and washing my face and changing into comfortable pajamas before putting them to bed. And then my cup was a little bit fuller, that I had more patience if things got tricky that night. So just little things like that, like being a little bit proactive with your self-care, which I know is easier said than done, but even just small basic things that are just one step ahead for yourself and for them. So yeah, looking at it both on a day-to-day basis outside of a hard moment, but then sensory wise in the moment, what can you do to help regulate yourself when it's feeling really hard? I know for me, sometimes it's as simple as like just getting up and leaving the room for a second and moving my body and just, not abandoning them, but just, okay, I will literally say to them now, like, I need to move for a minute because I'm getting upset. And they're older now, so that's different. But just, yeah, body awareness and then also day-to-day awareness.
Thanks, Sarah. What about you, Ellie? What are your go-to holistic tools to down-regulate your own stress and make sure that baby is calmer?
Yeah, I think sometimes we think of this as like when we're at like a level 10. So I like the image of a thermometer to be kind of like our regulation tool. And if we're being honest with ourselves, we don't just all of a sudden get to 10 where we're completely dysregulated, where we need to reach for all these like super duper calming tools. But we slowly move our way up and up and up to this full dysregulation. So one thing that I like to work with my clients with is to really notice as you're scooting up. So we catch ourselves when we're in that like 5 to 6 range, where we can say, okay, I can feel my body's getting tight. I can feel a little bit of activation in my system. And now I can take more gradual steps, more gentle steps to help my body regulate. So movement is huge for me. Like my body, as soon as I feel dysregulated, it's like, get up and go, girl. So sometimes that looks like taking the kids outside for a walk. And this is something I used to do when they were babies too, right? Everyone's in the stroller and let's go for a walk. Nature helps, movement helps, all of those types of things can really help to downregulate our nervous systems from a place of escalation. And then the other piece is asking for a minute or two to yourself, especially your clients and your audience who are very busy. They're going from high stress work to high stress home because having a baby is like having a full-time job on top of your full-time job. So that is really normal to feel overwhelmed. And if you have a partner or if you have support, it doesn't have to be, okay, you have that support to the second you get home and we switch immediately. Like, can we ask our partners or our support system for 10 to 20 minutes just for ourselves before we have to make that shift, right? So sometimes it feels like go, 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 go. And all we need is like a minute of calm just to be like, okay, do something for yourself, whether it's a shower, whether it's reading a book you're into, whether it's kind of scrolling social media, if that's what helps to regulate you in that moment. But taking that time to meet your own needs as well while you're busy trying to meet everybody else's, as you said, your boss or your baby, like all of those people in your life are important, but you're also important. So let's put you on the list too.
And you know what I love about your approach is that there is the element of the sensory approach, and all the advice that you gave, both of you. I noticed that you were going around the five senses, right? And that's so close to my line of work with neurolinguistic programming and clinical hypnotherapy, where we do a lot of the soothing through the five senses. And very often when I work with stressed mom to be, so I work a lot with very high powered professionals who are expecting moms, and we use clinical hypnotherapy to help them relax. We actually go through an inventory of the five senses to see which one they respond better to. So whether we listen to a soothing song, or we smell nice peppermint tea or some nice lavender oil, if they can just smell it, or we will see if they can touch a certain touch, like some silk or wool or a scarf or something warm, like a hot bottle. There will be all the different senses, even sometimes looking at a piece of art, like looking at a screenshot or a visual, so the visual sense, or the kinesthetic where it's a movement, so going for that walk or rocking. And what's interesting is when I do that with expecting moms, the baby responds, and the baby often has a preferred sense that gets an activation response. And I hear moms saying, oh, my baby just moved or responded to that sense activation. And I find that so beautiful. I was wondering if you can tell us more about that.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I don't know that we have a specific knowledge around, the baby in utero, that connection, but it makes sense that, when mom feels good, baby's gonna feel good too. We know that from biology that is very much the case. So, but that's lovely. I've never heard that connection. Thank you for sharing that.
No, yeah, no, of course. I was wondering how that translates later on in the stages of baby sleep, if
Yeah.
you've experienced that as a mom with different senses and inputs to the baby to help them fall asleep.
Yeah.
Go
That
ahead,
makes
Sarah.
sense. Like,
I know your guys have a lot of, your guys are sensory seekers. Go for
yeah.
it.
I don't know
Sensory
if I can
seekers. I love
make,
that.
yeah, I don't know if I can make direct correlations to like my pregnancies and their sensory preferences. Um, I mean, now that I'm thinking about it, like I walked every day with Ben and he was very active, but I don't know. I don't know if I could make a direct link without spending more time reflecting on that. But I do think like it is interesting how different their sensory preferences are. So it would be interesting to reflect more deeply on that at another time. But yeah, they are
But
much more
uh,
gross motor seeking and vestibular seeking than some, for sure.
I was just going to piggyback off of that just to say that, the sensory aspect is definitely something that plays into baby sleep across the board, whether we can tie it back to our pregnancies or not, where we have different sensory profiles for different babies, different children, right? So some babies are going to be really sensory seeking. So they want like a lot of tight squeezes, lots of touch, lots of vocalization, so auditory inputs. Some of them might not like certain textures. They might avoid some of the touch. They might want less movement. They might want less of these things. And there's not really a right or a wrong profile. Everyone's just unique in their sensory profiles. So, one thing that we can do to really support our babies is to experiment with different types of soothing, right? So, every baby is not going to be soothed in the same way. While rocking can feel universal, some babies really don't like it. Some babies would rather a tight squeeze. Some babies would rather you put them down and gently rub their back, and they feel a little overwhelmed if you're holding onto them too tight. So we just really encourage families to look at their whole family dynamic, look at the individual child in front of you, and try things, try different things, see what works, see what they respond to and what works well, and meet those sensory needs from that side of things. Because when we fill that sensory cup, then we find that babies can really settle in really nicely.
Hmm. And speaking about babies settling, I know that one of the things that you do so well on your socials, and that's definitely gotten my attention, is a bit of myth busting around baby sleep. So I was hoping we could do some popular myth busting, and you could tell me a little bit about those and what are the top myths that you would like to bust with us today.
Yeah. So I think the best ones are like the biggest one I hear all the time is this idea of baby self-soothing, right? Like it's something we talk about all the time on our platforms, because it's everywhere. That narrative is in a lot of the sleep resources that are available, is this idea that you need to teach your baby to self-soothe. But the tricky thing is, when we look at it from a neurological standpoint, the prefrontal cortex isn't even beginning to really come online until closer to age 3.5. And the prefrontal cortex is what's responsible for regulation, right? So that ability to self-soothe is not really online yet. We're still in the primitive part of our brain where we're going to cry when we're hungry, we're going to yell when we're sleepy, we're going to do all these very instinctual responses when we are a baby, because we don't have that upper level thinking yet. It's not online yet to be able to regulate ourselves. Now, some people are always going to say, well, my baby will settle themselves, they'll suck on their thumb, they'll like just rub their head and soothe themselves. And yes, some babies can do that from an already place of calm. But the thing is that if we are in a heightened state of stress, babies can't gradually work themselves down. Instead, what happens is they elevate and elevate and elevate without intervention. This is what kind of tends to happen until they're at this point where they can no longer sustain the energy output that's required to cry and to signal, and their body actually uses a shutdown mechanism to put themselves to sleep. So it can look like on the surface that, oh yeah, they cried, but then eventually they figured out a way to self-soothe. But unfortunately, what's happening is it's the body's protective mechanisms pushing down to say, no, this is a waste of energy, essentially. We gotta turn it all off, cut off. It's a shutdown response instead of falling asleep. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. That's so well explained. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So then the flip side of it, because I know some people, when they hear that, are like, well, what do we do instead here? And it goes back to what Sarah was talking about at the beginning, where we can co-regulate. The ability to self-soothe comes from many, many iterations of being soothed by another individual, and in this case, usually a parent. So what happens is our babies get escalated, we calm them down. They get escalated, we calm them down. They get escalated, we calm them down. And this loop continues to happen. And as it's happening, we're building neural pathways in the brain, which are, easy routes that they can take to say, hey, I am upset, but you know what comes next after we get upset? We calm back down. So that ability to do it on their own eventually comes from us doing it with them and for them at the beginning.
Right. Yes, absolutely. Sarah, I see you at the edge of your seat. I feel like you want to say something.
I was trying to hold in a sneeze. No. I will just kind of reiterate that it takes thousands of times. I don't know if Ellie said that part or not, but no, that was the only thing I was thinking about, that and trying to hold in a sneeze.
Is there anything that you think parents should know that is most often misunderstood, or a misconception, or maybe even you as mom, something that you've learned through trials and error that you kind of wish you knew back when you were a first-time mom?
I think the biggest thing for me is the power of attachment. So when I was a first-time mom, I heard a little bit of attachment, but not a ton. There wasn't a ton of conversation around it. And attachment is basically the quality of our relationship with another human being. And a secure attachment, research shows us, is the number one indicator of how a child will turn out. So there's so much noise, right? There's all these different conflicting ideas: breastfeeding, bottle feeding, bed sharing, solitary sleep, screen times, no screen times. There's so many polarizing topics around all of these things. But the one thing that is scientifically proven to lead to success for a child in the long run is whether or not they have a secure attachment with at least one caregiver. And secure attachment is built through creating trust and our responsiveness to our children, which I think if we all understood that at a fundamental level, when we're making our parenting choices, we could put that attachment and that relationship piece at the core of it all. Like, my kid is hitting me right now, but the top priority is that we maintain our relationship. So how am I going to respond in a way that we still stay connected. We're not severing that relationship in order for them to stop those behaviors. When we're talking about sleep, my baby's waking up at night. So how are we going to maintain that relationship while still moving toward what outcome we want? So I think that's something I wish I really understood when my babies were babies, is that is really so fundamental. It's the core of everything we do here. So just really encouraging that responsive relationship, that attunement, because that is what's going to lead to a lifelong secure attachment. And secure attachment's just such a really, really good thing for a baby or a person to have.
I'm so glad that you brought up the topic of attachment. And that really leads me to a question that I had, because I see that pop up so often. And there is so much debate as well on bed sharing, yes or no. How do you feel about it? Could you tell us a little bit about your personal experience with it, some of your client success story with it, and maybe any sort of either data or available research, life experience? Otherwise, I would love to hear.
Yeah, I can start with this one. For anyone who wants to read more about it, one book that I found really, really empowering was Sleeping with Your Baby by James McKenna. It has a lot of like research information and just like validating things that, whether you want to or not, can be really helpful. And then, yeah, I think it really does come down to like the perspective that bed sharing has to be all or nothing. Like it's okay to have an option, or really we recommend having a safe bed sharing option set up, even if it's not something you plan to do or want to do every single day. It's still really important to have safe bed sharing knowledge and a basic understanding of that, because there may be times where like your child is really sick or teething, or there's something going on and you just literally cannot stay awake in a rocking chair anymore or bounce them anymore. And if you have that as even a backup option, that can help a lot in terms of the safetiness of bed sharing or needing to co-sleep at any time. I personally did a lot of co-sleeping, and I don't regret it by any means. I know people say, oh, they're going to be in your bed forever, but like all three of them got to the point that they were like, goodbye, I'm good, see you later. So just to rest anyone's mind at that if it's like, oh, if you start, like you're doomed forever, like no, sometimes I still sneak into Hank's bed just so I can still go sleep with him, because I'm just like, oh, I miss it. And like, I did so much of it and now it's gone. So I think, yeah, main things with co-sleeping are just understanding and like bed sharing, knowing how to do it safely and having a backup plan should you need it on a really hard night, and knowing that you can just do it some nights and not have to do it all the time.
How long did you do the co-sleeping with your children?
I don't even know between all of them. My oldest is 9 next week, and we did with him right from the beginning. Yeah, between the three of them, several years.
Several years.
And it always looked different too. Like I know even when we had our third, like they all had floor beds, and some nights that was my favorite part, was that like I just co-slept with our third right from the beginning, fully prepared. And that was probably the best sleep that I got, because we had an ideal situation set up and it was easy. And then if the other two needed me, I knew he was safe because I had gone through the process of setting it up safely. And sometimes I just rotated beds if we were having a hard week, but I still always got to lay down and rest at least, instead of trying to stay awake and leave and all those kinds of things. So sometimes it can be really helpful in getting the most rest, but I will say, like, yeah, it's not for everyone, and that's okay. But I still think it's important to understand why it can be helpful, why it's good to have a backup plan for it just in case, because it is safer than falling asleep in a rocking chair, trying to resist it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Sarah. Elli, I was wondering if you could share some of your experience with co-sleeping and bed sharing.
Yeah. So I think at the beginning with my first, I believed the narrative that a lot of families believe, that it is inherently unsafe. It is never ever do this, because that's what my prenatal class taught me. That's what the hospital told me before I left with my baby, was that this was an inherently unsafe practice, and that there were just all risks to your baby if you were to take that approach to baby sleep. But like Sarah said, with my second, I read James McKenna's book, which I think is now called Safe Infant Sleep. I think there's a new version of it, but I read it to be empowered and to have the information, because I think informed decisions are really, really powerful when it comes to parenting. Not just like a blanket statement. It's easier to tell everyone just not to do it than to explain how to do it safely, which I think is where the bed sharing discussion kind of gets muddy. But I read it and I looked at the research and I looked at the information. And when you set it up nicely and right, it can be a safe alternative. So with my second, where with my first, I was like, never ever. With my second, we did a lot more bed sharing. Both Sarah and I had two under two. Which is very busy. It's very different than when you have one child that you're waking up for. So on hard nights, like Sarah was describing, we turned to bed sharing for challenging situations. When my kids were sick or teething, when I had gone in there 3 times in the last hour and something was bothering him and I didn't know what it was. So we moved to bed sharing on those trickier nights while he slept a little bit more independently most of the other nights. So I had like a little bit of that in between life when they were a baby. But then we did a lot more bed sharing as he got a bit older. When he started school, I noticed he was looking for a lot more connection because that was the first time he'd been away from me all day. Then he was really seeking that connection at nighttime. So we did a little bit more bed sharing as, a younger child when he started school. And that worked really well until it didn't. And then we made that change too. So I think there's many, many different ways this can look. There's no right or wrong. It's just what would work best for your unique family.
And I love the fact that you used the word empowered when you read that book. And I think empowered is what many parents want to feel. And instead, they feel a lot of overwhelm. Let's be honest, being a first-time parent can be very overwhelming. Of course, it's probably one of the most beautiful chapters of one's life, but also very overwhelming. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how your method really helps transform the parent's journey from total overwhelm to feeling empowered.
Yeah, so I'll jump in on this one. I think the biggest thing is that we are actually encouraging parents to trust their instincts instead of saying, like, nope, this is how it is, like blanket statement, like Ellie was kind of saying, right? And because we do everything so holistically, like, if you're telling me your child needs this, like, I believe you. Let's incorporate that into how we're doing things, right? If you know your child prefers this, okay, like, you know your child best. So it's because it's not generic and one size fits all age-based kind of approach, it is allowing parents to be like, no, I do know this. I do know my child well. I do know what they need. I just need a little more information in a safe place to combine that to take the steps I need to get more sleep, right? So it's taking what we know about infant and toddler sleep and what is biologically normal and normalizing that for them and giving that information, which that in itself is empowering, because if you know more about what is normal, that helps you make decisions with confidence, right? And then also combining that with what they know to be true about their own child and their own family and all of those things, and allowing it to be a very personal change. Even if we're using some of the same general transitions, it's still very, okay, what works for you? What feels right? What are you instinctually feeling called to do? So we may start out with doing things a certain way, and a mom comes back the next week and says, okay, this part's feeling off, or I feel ready to try this. Okay, great. Like, I trust you to trust your instincts, right? And just letting parents make those changes. When I think of it being empowering too, I always think of my night weaning journey with my second, because he, like, we joke, he's 7. He'd probably still be nursing, not actually, but he just was like very much about breastfeeding in the middle of the night. And I hit a point that I had been nursing the 2 back to back. So I was like at 3 years of night feeds and just like, okay, I'm absolutely done. And that was like the really scary transition for me, because it was like, I'm really clear on how I want to parent right now. And what I've been doing was what felt right. But I'm also just at a point where I need a change. And so allowing parents for both to be true, that it's like, I still want to be responsive. I still want to show up, but also I need to meet my own needs. And I know when I was able to start night weaning him without sleep training or cried out or abandoning him or anything like that, or feeling like I was abandoning him, that was like a huge moment of empowerment for me, was that I got him back to sleep and I was still present and still responsive, but I still got to say no to what I was done with. Like that first time I got him back to sleep without nursing him, and I felt like, hey, I still supported all your emotion. I was still very present. I was still very close and responsive to you. That was what was empowering to me, because I got to meet my own needs and still very much protect our relationship. And I got to do it at a pace and in a way that felt good to me at the same time. That's
Thank you
kind
for
of an
sharing
example I
that.
like to use of how we're trying to meet your needs and also still protect that desire to have a strong relationship with your child.
Thanks for sharing. I was wondering as well to what extent you see parents, maybe before even having children, have sleep anxiety. In other words, I think having a baby has gotten a bad rep when it comes to sleep. I think there is a sort of social jokes. Oh, wow, you're pregnant. Oh, say goodbye to sleep. Or, people say those things, and it's almost become the norm that if one is expecting their first baby, you just say something about, well, that's it. You're never going to sleep for the rest of your life, or you make those kind of nonchalant jokes. Do you think that's a good thing? Do you think we should rectify that? Should first-time parents just brace themselves knowing that they're most likely not going to sleep? Tell us more.
Yeah, so with that one, I
I
feel like it's important to have realistic expectations. Like, yes, your sleep is going to change. Yes, you are going to be needed in a whole different way. But I feel like if someone's saying anything, it should be offering support or congratulations and not making it feel more daunting. Like, why are we making parents dread what should be exciting? And yes, a hard transition. Absolutely. We can validate that like it is going to be a big change and it is probably going to feel hard. But that doesn't mean we should just be tearing them down like that before it even happens. I think if you're going to say anything, it should be excitement or, providing support or offering to help, if anything.
How much do you think there may be an impact if a parent has a past history or current is history with insomnia or sleep struggle and is now having a baby? I wonder if you've worked with parents who do struggle themselves with their own sleep and then also have that additional layer of anxiety with baby sleep.
Yeah, I have worked with some families where the mom says, it's not only that like my baby's waking a couple times, but once I wake up, I have a really hard time getting back to sleep myself. And that can definitely ripple and overflow and trickle into the baby sleep, right? And we can have all this anxiety built up around how's my baby going to sleep? How are they like if they're not getting enough sleep? Because I have this kind of not great relationship with sleep myself where it's hard for me. I don't want that to be hard for my baby. Like a lot of these things where it's probably normal infant sleep behaviors can get enmeshed with our own experiences with sleep, which can make things feel bigger than they are, right? Because in most cases, babies are waking up many times throughout the night in some cases, but they're very quickly returning to sleep. It's almost the equivalent of us waking up, rolling over, saying, hey, not morning yet on our alarm clock. I still have time to sleep. And then closing our eyes, going back to sleep. If you did that a couple times throughout the night, you're probably going to still wake up feeling really rested, which is kind of what happens for our babies. They wake up, they get soothed right back down, and they're getting enough sleep on their own. The babies are doing pretty well, but it's harder on us because for each time we're supporting them back to sleep, we're probably awake for a period of time that leads to, us feeling really tired. So that sleep anxiety does make sense because we're feeling tired. We don't know what their sleep's going to do to our sleep. Like it's normal for that to feel kind of connected. Um, I felt it a lot with my first, that sense of like, I don't know what this night is going to bring. And I think one big shift I made was realizing that me overanalyzing it and stressing about what the night might look like and doing all of these things did not have any positive or negative impact on how my baby was going to sleep that night. So I could obsessively think about it throughout the day. I could be anxious about it, and he was still either going to sleep or not sleep well that night. And as soon as I realized that, hey, you know what? This is just stealing the joy from right now, and we can do hard things. And even if he wakes up at night, we're going to be okay. That shifted a lot of the stress off of sleep for me. And then with the second baby, I just kind of took it in the moment, day by day, and we made a big shift to not make it feel so stressful, like a battle, like this big thing, right? And that experience when you're kind of just like, okay, yeah, babies sleep sometimes just like people. They don't like people, they are people. Like adults, we sometimes have a hard time falling asleep. They're going to have a hard time too. That's okay. We'll take it as it comes. That shift from like control to acceptance was very liberating. So I think if anyone is struggling with this idea of like sleep anxiety or overwhelm, just holding on to that idea of, you can meet them where they're at and just accept them for where they're at, it takes so much of the pressure off of you and brings back so much of the joy.
And Ellie, I was wondering, how have you, as a mom, coped with sleep deprivation at times? I'm sure there's been nights where you really haven't slept very well. I was wondering if you could share a few tricks or practical hacks on how you dealt with your own lack of sleep and how you made sure it didn't have a negative ripple impact on baby next round of sleep, etc.
Sure. Yeah. So I think that's very tangible advice, because as much as we can do all the right things, there are going to be nights where we don't sleep very well. So a couple of things that can help if it's just you in the home. My rule was always, if you didn't sleep, you must shower, because I know that it's an easy out to be like, I'm too tired to even take a shower. But a shower, I don't know about everybody here, but for me, makes me feel like a different person. It brings me to life a little bit. It gives me a little boost of energy. So that was always a rule I had for myself, was if I felt like really depleted, that was going to be something I made sure I did within a few hours of waking up in the morning. Another thing I think that we don't have enough of nowadays, and like if you're in the early stages of a pregnancy or you're expecting a baby, this is where we should be spending a little bit of energy, is really building a village of support. And I know we don't always live near grandparents or aunts and uncles or familial support, but a lot of neighborhoods have communities for new moms. There's Facebook groups, there's virtual places, there's drop-in centers where we can make connections with other parents who live nearby. And if you have another parent who lives nearby and you can say, hey, I didn't sleep so well, could you give me an hour of your time, please, while I just catch a power nap, right? Where like getting even a little bit more sleep when we're feeling completely sleep deprived can really reset our day, help us along. So I think those are two things that we can be thinking of. And then the final thing is going outside. Nature helps us, regulates us, it brings us energy, it does a lot for us. So that's a third option if you're feeling really depleted and you don't have the capacity to be depleted in that day. But then the flip side of it is, it's also okay to take it easy some days, right? And it might not be as easy of an option for someone who has a high demand job. But if it is, even if there is like okay, what are the lower stress activities that you could do right now? Could we clear the inbox? Could we, respond to something we hadn't done where we'll feel a sense of accomplishment, but it's not a big, heavy ask for a day where we're running very much on empty? Could we take those simple steps? Is that something we can do? And having those low energy tasks where maybe we're offloading, tonight I was planning to make a 4-course meal and I don't have any energy. So we're going to order a pizza and that's going to be dinner tonight, and that's okay, right? So just having those different responses for different levels of energy, I think, can be a great, if we think of it in advance, it's a great tool to have as well.
Thank you, Ellie. I appreciate that. And Sarah, do you have any sleep-deprived mom go-to tactics, please?
I usually, this is very specific, but if we get out the train tracks, my kids will play for hours. If they like the literal wooden train tracks with trains. So I always try and just get out something new that it's be like, okay, I'm going to build this with you. I'm going to pay attention to you and do this. So fill up their cup a little bit and then be like, okay, now I'm going to chill a little bit. So, and I think like Ellie said, like just because you had a bad sleep doesn't mean the whole day has to suck. Like eat something healthy, move your body, take a shower, do what you can to take care of yourself, asking for help where you can. And then, yeah, I don't know, there's something specific that maybe you leave for those harder days, put away that entertain your kids, or something for your baby that they don't do all the time. And then just seeing if you can buy a little bit of downtime that way.
Thank you so much. I was wondering if there is anything we haven't covered yet that you wanted to share as a last word of advice for moms listening that maybe having a rough day today. Maybe that's why they clicked play on this episode and they may need a little bit of grace, a little bit of love, a little bit of advice from you. Is there one last word of wisdom you would like to share?
I think as my oldest turns 9 next week, as I said, just recognizing that like that feels so, it is long ago, but my youngest is only 4, so not that long ago, that those like really hard all encompassing days were like my life every single day. And like it does change. I won't say it gets easier because there's different parts of older children that are challenging and new, but like it is a phase. And I know when you're in that moment, it doesn't always mean that much to hear that, but just knowing that everything you are doing right now, being responsive, showing up for them, building safety, focusing on the attachment, like you will see that come in your relationship as they get older. And I was saying, like, I know I should be sad. My baby's turning 9, but like, my oldest is turning 9, but I also am like loving seeing our relationship at this age and things like that. So just knowing that it is just a period of time, everything you are doing matters, and that, yeah, it's all worth it.
Thank you, Sarah. Ellie, one last word of wisdom.
Yeah, I think it's just that, you know, you're doing the hard thing and that it can feel hard because it is. I think we don't talk about it enough that it is. It's really, really hard to have a baby. And I don't say that to scare people, but to normalize and see you in that stage. Like it is all encompassing. Pulls on all your needs. It's hard for you to get anything done. You have a whole person that you're responsible for who can do very little by themselves. So if it's feeling hard, it's because it is. And that doesn't mean that you're not doing an amazing job. Because what I know is I have never met a mom yet who is not doing their very best and actually their baby's favorite person on the world. So if you're having a hard day, hold on to the fact that you're doing an amazing job and your baby is really, really lucky to have you.
Thank you. Beautiful words too. And I know exactly who to turn to now when I have my first baby. So there you go. I'll be adding you on speed dial, and I'm sure I'll be needing lots of your services in the near future. So thank you so much. How do you want our listener to get in touch with you, to get into your world if they need your help for their baby?
Yeah, so I think the best place to find us is usually Instagram, just at My Connected Motherhood. We also have our website, and you can email us from there too. But yeah, we're present on all platforms it's all us. So yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I wish you a good night's sleep with your children and family. And thank you so much. Take good care.
You're very welcome. Bye.